mentioned a little bit, you work with stores, but tell us a little bit more in depth your role with JCPenney.
Yeah, so I joined 6 years ago, and I was one of the individuals that I was ready for Ron Johnson to kind of revolutionize retail. I had been with Kohl's for 10 years. I had a lot more to learn, a lot more to give, and I think JCPenney provided that opportunity. In the past 6 years, I've been promoted 5 times. Just recently, I support the stores from an HR business standpoint, but when I joined, I supported the merchants, design. I also went into talent acquisition. I was the leader of them through many different leadership changes. And again, as I support now with JCPenney, I asked for change, I got change, no question. It has been, I've learned more in the past 6 years. Really, the first year I learned more than all my 10 years at Kohl's. And so again, I find it very fortunate to be able to work with people like Mia, but to be in this ever-changing retail environment and to continue to learn year after year.
So what got you interested in retail? Because you mentioned you work with Kohl's, FAO Schwartz as well. So you've sort of been in retail for most of your career, if not all.
It is, yeah.
So what is it about retail that you particularly enjoy?
I wish I could say, so if you know me, everyone's like, you're a planner, you know that. I actually have a degree in HR, but what I didn't know is that retail and HR combine very nicely. And I didn't know that. And so when I had first gotten the opportunity, I was 21 years old, I had just graduated, moved to Vegas because my grandparents lived there. It was either Vegas or Chicago where I'm from, and got my foot in the door with FAO Schwarz. And it was an institution, if any of you remember, that was around. It was fantastic. Again, open 365 days a year. You got to, your main consumer were children, and that was retail. But they gave me a large responsibility in HR. And so when I got to do that and see the impact that you made to individuals, to their development, to their engagement, and I could do that and like get paid for it, that was amazing. And then I continued that when they actually unfortunately closed, and that was another learning for me. During my time, I just packed up my little Mustang and moved to Chicago and joined Ann Taylor Loft as they were growing, and then Kohl's called me when they had 300 stores and decided to join them as a recruiter. And then they grew 100 stores per year, and then the opportunity with JCPenney happened 6 years, and we moved here with my family at the time. So I'd like to say, oh, I had it all planned, but I really didn't. And again, it affords. It's I call Mia my sponsor. She's a great business partner, but she's also, we talked about it earlier in terms of sponsorship versus mentorship. And I've had excellent people along the way kind of opening doors for me, but it's also forging those partnerships and relationships and understanding the strategy sometimes behind it. I've learned over time, but there have been a ton of people that have kind of said, we're gonna go ahead and help you through this journey based on what we know.
Yeah. So just as a level set here, what's the scope of the store's operation with JCPenney?
So we currently have 865 stores throughout the country. My responsibility is kind of, if you draw a line across the United States, I have everything from California all the way out to Virginia, down to Florida. It's about 492 stores, including Puerto Rico. And that really is the scope. So are you talking about job responsibility or? Well,
both actually, yeah. So
Okay.
kind of get a sense of how many stores that you're responsible for operations of, but also job responsibility. What do you do for those stores?
Okay.
What does she not do?
So I'd like to say that we really have to help our leaders understand the people impact. So whether it's the selection portion, whether it's the talent management portion, whether that's engagement, retention, not only in retail are you dealing with an ever-changing environment, but you're also dealing with an institution, to Mia's point, that's over 100 years old. So when you think about the front line, and that's what we are support for the front line. I have a team of 12 that are variously scattered throughout the organization, throughout the country, and they are there to answer any type of questions that may come up. And they are not the, training and development, very exciting. You get to implement it, you get to see it. It's like associate relations. It's things that you cringe about. It's things that, like, you ask me anything or ask me to be involved in anything, nothing shocks me anymore. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I would tell you that I trust in my team as much as anybody, and we are there to mitigate risk. And that's kind of the biggest part of the job, and risk from people leaving or risk that happens within those stores. And again, with the resources that we continually take away you have to become more and more creative on how you're impacting the stores, the business, the people, and my team is there to be able to help support that.
Yeah. So would you say that your team is sort of a channel for some of Mia's talent development services?
No question, absolutely.
Okay. And so how do you both work together? So, I mean, you mentioned that sort of you see Mia as a bit of your sponsor, but, you know, obviously the work that she does is important for the stores
Absolutely.
that you do as well. So it's not just a personal thing, but it's actually professional. So describe that relationship. Maybe Melissa, you can start, and Mia, you can kind of give perspective on that too.
So I got to meet Mia 3 years ago, and make no mistake, when Ron Johnson came to the organization, he blew everything up. And I would say that if he was sitting here, so it's not anything no one knows. So her role was really to kind of put it back together again and to figure out, you know, when I came to the organization 6 years ago, people were doing things because it was cyclical in nature. Like they would take it off of the shelf and say, okay, it's November 10th and we have to do this, this, and this. But she really got to be able to put things back together because it made sense and get ownership from the end user to be able to do that. So when we work together, what I appreciate about her is she's encouraging, she's also influential, and she has this sense of empowerment. But make no mistakes, like we go head to head many times, and I think that that's something that's invaluable in an organization. I really don't care what your title is. If you're valuable or you have an invaluable relationship, you have to be able to push back, allow for that robust dialogue, because at the end of the day, it's not about us, it's about the end user, and it's about what those people are receiving. And if we don't have that robust dialogue, or we don't challenge to say, have you piloted this? Have you asked what the end user needs? Because sometimes you're in kind of this bubble and you're like, nope, I believe that this is what it is. And we've been down the path where sometimes we have to be on the front line answering those questions, and we have to believe in it as much as anything else. So that's kind of our relationship and our partnership. I hope you agree.
Yeah, I radically disagree with her.
This is the part where you talked about butting heads and disagreeing.
No, I completely agree with what Melissa was sharing. So one of the things that I really appreciate about the partnership that we have, and I would say with the generalists in general, is that, you know, we talked about kind of what are your learnings along the way. Talent development, leadership development, we cannot do our jobs without the generalists. So they are the translators, the interpreters, and really the needs gatherers for us. And so they're the ones who are working closest with our associates and our leaders. And so, you know, one of the things that I think sometimes can happen is in the talent space is that we're a center of excellence, right? So we have beliefs about what things ought to be done and how they ought to be executed. And then there's the real world of like, how does this actually play out? And I think sometimes there's an opportunity for rifts or tension between the two groups because there's you know, each are very confident and comfortable in their own spaces. I think what I really, really appreciate about Melissa is she's a wonderful partner in terms of let's get on a common goal, right? So let's be really clear what we're trying to solve for, and then and is very open to kind of partnering around what are our different options, how can we approach this, and so it's an easy way to work. The challenge, I think, is that there is so much coming at folks in Melissa's role. I mean, the world of the generalist is just a crazy job where every day you don't know what's going to happen. You might have a plan, and then the plan gets blown up. And so I kind of go back to my old consulting days where it was like, but I know exactly what we're going to do. They can't say that. And so sometimes our job is to really be sensitive to now is not the right time for us to be pushing out a certain program, or we're doing too much at the same time and they're having to field all these questions at the same time. So I think that's part of it, is having a really, really good open relationship where we can have those conversations and then respect kind of the point of view of our generalist partners.
So have there been instances where that relationship has gone off the rails? Maybe not too terribly, but where, you know, you have sort of like, okay, we're not on the same page here. How have you brought that back together in order to make sure that the relationship works?
So I think that we're moving so quickly, and what's interesting is that we're under the HR umbrella. So to our business partners that are out there, whether it's leadership or our SVP of stores, we have to be aligned. And so sometimes those individuals grab us individually, and for the mere fact that we want to be customer service oriented, we're committing to things that maybe we don't really understand. And so, we have a new SVP of stores, and he is looking at every single program, including onboarding. So onboarding right now, which again, I think as development leaders have to look at, is that it needs to be very, very quick and to the point. And so we're looking at a way to be able to streamline it, but everyone has an opinion. So whether it's store operations, or whether it's field, or whether it's training and development, or HR, or even the end user, everyone has an opinion. This is one where typically it would happen in silos, or they would create their own trainings in silos. And what we're trying to do, specifically with onboarding, is break down those silos to all get in a room and figure that out. But even with that mere fact, like I was in a talent review just 2 weeks ago in Atlanta, and the SVP is like, I want this, I want this, I want that. I'm taking down all the notes. Then we come back and we try to get in a room and understand what that looks like. Even though I'm like, yes, we can figure that out, and yes, we can do this, and yes, I'm not committing necessarily in that room, but when we come back, it's imperative that we align for what it is, because training development wasn't necessarily there, or store ops wasn't necessarily there. So whereas maybe in the past we'd go down the path of people working individually, it's really trying to figure that out. So that would be one example, and those examples happen every day.
Every day, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned the onboarding. What other programs do you feel have been particularly successful from your partnership point of view? Onboarding is one. Are there others that you would point to that you say is, I think we really worked this out well? I would point to this as a positive example of our partnership and working together.
Yes, so talent tryouts, so when we talk about the selection part of it, that's extremely important. It needed to be refreshed and somewhat rebranded, but really taking, again, that end user into consideration. So Mia's team did an excellent job in partnering with that end user, and when I mean end user, it's the stores, and figuring out what the gaps are, what did they like to see, and also real life type of customer service. With our service industry being elevated, is what does that look like? There was a conference where we had all the general managers in from all over the country, and her team was able to present that at the expo for every single one of the general managers, and it was clear that they were able to fill that gap and also take partners along the way. So the end product, there was no pushback, and it's not as if it's not being used. It's an excellent tool that's out there, that's very quick, that actually was created, again, by the end user with Mia's team.
Yeah. And what Melissa is referring to is it's actually a really, really fun thing. If you ever want to get a job at JCPenney, just go apply, and you'll get to go through one of these. When we talk about talent tryouts, they're actually simulations that general managers can actually run. So when we think about role plays, there's sort of a heavy sigh, like, ugh, who wants to go through a role play? But these role plays are actually really, really fun. We take potential associates, bring them into a room. We have 3 different kinds of role plays that we would put them into, depending upon the number of individuals that we're putting through a selection process at any given time, and also what kind of role that they would be best suited for. And some of them involve team building, where you have to build using a set of blocks. Another one is where you actually have to do a set or a display inside the store and have to show customer service. And so there's ways that we've tried to, in a very inexpensive way, create kind of simulations that can be executed really, really easily by people who aren't trained to be, assessors of performance. And what's interesting is that the general managers and the assistant store managers really enjoy executing them, but even more interesting, our candidates love them.